Hello and welcome to Please Me. Last episode, Eve interviewed Kate Wells from Parlor Games, and they talked about all things related to hormones and how they help our bodies stay healthy. Be sure to check it out. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Eve is a licensed sexual health physical therapist on a mission to destigmatize conversations about sex. Please sit back and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me. Looking for the best live streaming or podcast recording site? Look no further than StreamYard. Get $10 off your first purchase. For podcast hosting, Buzzsprout is the absolute best option out there. Get $20 off your first purchase. Who's looking for a sexy date? STC.com is the premier ethically non-monogamous dating site that also houses a wealth of information regarding sexuality and sexual health. Join the Please Me Health Collective on STC.com and listen to Eve's free live webinars. Use code 37340 for a free trial membership. Maybe you're in the market for some sexy toys to add some spice to the bedroom. Check out the Organic Lovin' link for the best online store for sex toys, lubes, and more. Are you in menopause, perimenopause, or postmenopause? I have found the absolute best products called Parlor Games. I use the estriol and progesterone topical creams, and they have been game changers. Maybe you've listened to the show and want to be featured as a guest. Eve uses Podmatch to connect with new or potential guests. Reach out and begin the process today. Have any questions? Feel free to call me on the OWL app. Use code EH576472 for $10 free to use on the best networking app around. Give me a call. If you're experiencing sexual issues and need a physical therapy consultation or appointment, reach out to Eve and make an appointment on pleaseme.online. See all links and info in the show notes. Hello and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex by turning the sheets into our classroom. Today, I have the honor to welcome Dr. Leanna Wolfe to Please Me, and I am so excited to talk to her. She wrote a book called 177 Lovers and Counting: My Life as a Sex Researcher. And she was a professor of anthropology and taught gender, sex, and culture. She was also a sex researcher, or is a sex researcher, and has discussed sex history and how orgasms work, polyamory and jealousy, and so many other amazing topics. And I just can't wait to get into all of it with you today. I have a feeling there's going to be a part 2 and a part 3 to this podcast because you are just such a wealth of information. So welcome to Please Me. How are you today, Leanna?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me to be part of your show.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on and for agreeing to be here. I first just want to kind of learn a little bit about your background and what brought you to be interested in this topic and all of these topics, I should say.
Oh, well, I would credit a couple of different things that led me to be who I am. One is I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, right on the brink of the sexual revolution and second wave feminism. So even when I was in high school, I was in a women's consciousness raising group. So I was talking about these kinds of things when I beginning as a fairly young person. And then on top of it, I was really shy. And so I was drawn to the practice of anthropology, which encourages observation and not necessarily pushing answers, but letting answers come to you. So I did a lot of what anthropologists call participant observation to try to learn how things work and how people are and how humans negotiate intimacy. So that's a little bit of what's behind me. I first lived in a Mexican village as a teenager, being an exchange student, and all kinds of challenging things happened to me there. And it awakened my appetite for being uncomfortable and figuring it out, and then telling story about what I was learning. And eventually, I did go to university and got a BA and then an MA in anthropology, and early on was very interested in s- sex and sexual learning and partnering patterns, and did a lot of study related to that. And then when I went around to getting my doctorate, I ended up doing my dissertation on polyamory and jealousy.
Yes, and I just briefly mentioned that earlier. That is so interesting. And, you know, what you call partnering patterns, right, is what I call relationship
Mhm.
options, right? It's like a non-technical sort of way of saying the same thing,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
And so can we go into just briefly just a few different, because everybody knows monogamy, right? And that's like kind of what society is constantly pushing on us. But there are so many different partnering patterns around the world,
Right.
or quote unquote
Yeah,
relationship options. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
so can we go into
Yeah.
some of those
All
and
right.
give me?
Well, what we can call monogamy is through the lens of anthropology, it's simply being married to one person. And the alternative through the lens of anthropology is polygamy, which is having multiple partners within a marriage. And the two standard forms of polygamy are polyandry and polygyny. Um, Polygyny is one husband and multiple wives, and that's the most common form. Something like 84.5% of folks who are in a polygamous marriage are in one where there's one husband, and only 0.5% are in one where there's um, multiple husbands and one wife. Now, one of the things that we're much more interested in here in the Western world is various forms of open relationships. And they could take the form of polyamory, they could take the form of swinging, they could take the form of some version of monogamish, where one is still socially and economically and partnered with one person, but they may have emotional and sexual connections with others. The most common form of monogamish is swinging, where folks typically endeavor to enjoy the freedom of being play partners and with multiple folks. And this could be at parties, at conferences, at um, me- meetups with another couple, and the goal is not to display any kind of jealousy or virtually any kind of emotion, but just to enjoy playing as sexually available and exploratory. Now, polyamory, has um, been around in terms of multiple partner sexuality for a very long time, because humans are basically not a monogamous species at all. It's only here in the
Ding, ding, ding,
Western world
ding.
where we
Sorry, I just had to get excited about you
yeah,
saying
and
that.
through biology yeah, you're excited. So, through biology, we know that the kinds of species that are clearly non-monogamous are ones where there's defined sexual dimorphism. And we have that amongst humans where males look different than females and are also larger typically than females. Also, a species where there's a large testes, because what would be the point of this if you're only needing to impregnate one partner every so often? A larger one enables males to compete in interuterine sperm wars. And this is something that some biologists started chatting about Baker and Bella some years ago. And they've noted that there's different kinds of sperm that are produced depending on the context of the encounter. So,
Wow.
if a
I did not know
man
anything
is
about this. That is
oh, well,
fascinating.
here I am to tell you.
I love the what did you call it? Interuterine
Interuterine sperm wars.
sperm
Yeah,
wars.
so
Oh my gosh. It's
basically,
like a whole
so
another
if a
level of
man is partnered yeah.
go ahead.
So
Go
if a,
ahead. You
a
go.
man is partnered with an ongoing live-in partner, he is typically producing egg penetrating sperm for whenever she is ovulating so that they have a chance at causing a pregnancy. Now, if he leaves for a while and then returns, let's say he goes to a conference or whatever this man does, or he's a traveling businessman or something, and when he returns, his body senses that she could have been with other partners because he was away, and as a result his ejaculate will be different. It will contain fighter sperm and blocker sperm, as well as egg penetrating sperm, to deal with the possibility that other ejaculate have arrived there and are potentially going to cause an impregnation. Now, if he on his business trip met another woman, and whether he personally knew her status or not, but if he had or a sexual encounter with her, his body would produce sperm to enable potential penetration of her eggs. So they would produce fighter sperm to fight off whatever other sperm were there,
Okay. And that
as
happens
well
all
as
in
penetrator sperm.
so
So it's
it
a
happens all
pretty
in
fun,
unison.
yeah, so this is like, yeah, all because of context. So, and then, as anthropologists who study these kinds of things, we certainly look at things like language and the different terms that folks who practice, for example, polyamory, generate to explain who is a potential partner and where one stands in relationship to other folks. So one of the things that poly people really endeavor to do is to keep, if they are in a primary relationship and they're practicing some version of what's called hierarchical polyamory, they attempt to keep that ongoing home relationship safe and secure, while at the same time enjoying the possibility of excitement with a new partner.
Okay, incredible. I mean, I had never heard of there being different types of sperm, and it's so amazing. The human body amazes me every day because there are just so many things that, I don't know and that we don't know. And when we talk to people like you who study this, we get to learn, that there are
Mhm.
fighter sperm and there are egg penetrating sperm, and there's multiple different types of sperm depending on the context, depending on who the person is having sex with. That is so fascinating to me. It's really amazing. Um, I am so fascinated by this. Um, I'm curious because we were talking about how, humans are not, very good at or not typically monogamous, even though our society says that's what you should be, right? And I think
Mhm.
that that is key for people to understand because it is okay to have multiple interests. Let's just put it that way. And I would love to know
Yeah.
I would love to know, what your personal relationship style is or partnering pattern, if you don't mind sharing that personal little
Well,
bit of
oh,
information.
sure. And at different times in my life, it's been different.
Yes.
And but typically I was always a curious person. And early on when I had my first boyfriend and I was living in Berkeley and we were students, the moment we started having sex, I became curious about what other guys were like. Like, is what he did with me and I did with him what everybody does with each other, or what else do guys do? And so I did a little exploring just to find out about that. And then at some point in my, I guess, mid 20s, I was living in New York and I was in grad school in anthropology. And I was really taken by a guy I'd met who introduced me to, I guess, what we might could, in the broadest way, say non-vanilla sex. We
Okay.
were doing things that I didn't even know had a name, but it was all part of bondage and discipline. And I was enjoying it and had no idea how turned on I could get. But the truth was, is he wasn't exactly looking for a primary partner. He'd already had been married and had a child and was really living in New York City to expand his horizons. And while I was one of his horizons, I wasn't going to be the one he was going to land with. And I ended up meeting someone who was more available for what we might call a primary relationship. But I still liked the other guy. And my home partner just didn't have an appetite for non-vanilla sex. And so at that point, way before there was a word called polyamory, I was seeing two guys. I was living with one and visiting another probably every week or so, having my exciting visit and encounter and conversation because he was also an anthropologist and we had loads of things to talk about. And then I'd go home and live my wonderful life with my home partner. And so that was kind of my style for, most of my 20s. And then at some point, I moved to Los Angeles and I partnered with someone who also had a long history of non monogamy. And we started out actually being monogamous because just were really into each other and had so much conversation and so much wonderful stuff to do and say. And we did backpacking trips, and he had a young daughter, and we would take her places, and I got to be do the Disneyland thing and everything else. But then at some point along the way, he met someone else. And I was from my previous history, I presumed that it would be something akin to what I had done in New York, which was he would, visit her for an evening or something and then come home. And, he'd see her every so often and it wouldn't be disruptive. But she was a single woman who was very smitten with him and believed that he'd gotten involved with her with the ultimate path of a relationship escalator where he would eventually or very soon leave me and partner with her, and then they would be, living together and potentially marrying. And I was in shock that that's what was on her agenda, because I truly thought that he would honor what I thought was standard behavior. So, which was, incidental other partners. And so
I love
to
that that's your standard
accommodate this,
behavior, right?
yeah. And
You
so
really were paving your own
Y
way.
yeah, I thought, that we were doing some version of what's these days is called hierarchical polyamory, where
Right.
the home partner is the home partner and everyone else is incidental. And, they could be a comet who you see very infrequently, or they could be someone who, visits, you visit maybe every week or every month or something. And so she expected to be on equal terms, have in equal status to my status. And I, that was very new to me. And it was extremely difficult for all of us because I don't think he'd ever done something with someone who was so demanding of an equal status. And I ended up going to Africa to try to find out how people manage sharing a husband, because basically that's what we were trying to do. And so I stayed there for about 6 months and lived in different villages and talked to different people who were everyone I talked to. And, I came with this dilemma that they'd never heard of from the Western world. And they would say, well, you guys have divorce. You, madam, have an education. You could go earn money for yourself. You don't need your husband's money. Why would you stay with him if you have the freedom to leave? And so they didn't exactly get the passion emotion thing that I was talking about. They were looking at things in very practical ways. And in fact, at that time, which was about 1998, Bill Clinton had been discovered to be having the affair with Monica Lewinsky. And they would give me their comments on that. And they'd say, he's a wealthy man. He can afford more than one wife. Why shouldn't he be able to take her as a wife? And look at his situation. He only has one daughter. This man needs a son to carry on his name and his legacy. He should be able to marry this girl, Monica, and have a son with her. And this would help him more in his standing in the world. So, I learned some amazing things there that, I may not have been invited into in quite that way in other than because of my need to understand things, that I was invited into all these worlds. So when I returned, we really did try to be some kind of family and triad, but it was always extremely difficult for me because I just thought that I should be the senior partner and I shouldn't have to be equal with her. But he was very taken by her and was very happy to spend as much time as he could with her. So ultimately, some 4 years later, I ended up doing my doctoral dissertation on polyamory and jealousy because I had been through it and I was very interested in how other folks who were taking on the practice of polyamory, how they manage situations like this.
Yes. And, jealousy is a really big emotion that can come of being in a polyamorous or in an open relationship, another maybe swinger or another type of open relationship. And so it's interesting that you studied it, and specifically because you were trying to figure things out for yourself. And in doing so, you were helping all of us, understand jealousy for ourselves, right? And the idea of compersion.
Right.
So I would love for you to kind of expand on jealousy and compersion here now.
Oh, yeah. Right, of course. And so in my research, I was trying to find out if folks who were practicing polyamory were able to engage compersion. And compersion is this basically invented a concept, and polyamory itself is an invented culture, as is monogamy. But the idea behind compersion is you have loving regard for your partner having positive times with their other lover or lovers. And so that, if he was leaving to go over to visit her, I would be really happy for him doing that, and I would want him to have a really good time. And so in querying all these folks I was studying, and basically I created a questionnaire based on a lot of the things I was struggling with and other things I knew about compersion. And I found out that everyone largely who was practicing polyamory was endeavoring to make this work, and they thought compersion was possible. Now, I, was also teaching college at the same time, and my students were just mainstream Americans. They were not signed on to polyamory at all. And when I discussed compersion to them with them, they thought it was the most absurd thing. And if any of them, I think one of them, tried to study some version of this with, for a class study, and there was zero capacity or interest in practicing compersion. It was seen as like basically untenable and not at all core of who we as humans are able to be emotionally. So it's a fascinating thing in terms of the power of culture. And the culture of polyamory very much invites its participants to think of relationships as bigger than two people, but rather maybe to think in terms of a tribe or a kitchen table. There's a term recently used called kitchen table polyamory, where folks all hope or endeavor to be loving and supportive and inclusive of their partner's partners. And so whether they're partnered with their partner's partner or just in community with them, they all want the best for each other.
I love that concept actually because, you know, for me, love is not something that you can contain. And so, monogamy contains your love. You're only allowed to love one person, right? And with polyamory, you can, the sky's the limit. You can expand your love to however many people you really want,
Sure.
and it could be however many people you have the time for, really,
Mhm.
because
Yep.
time is obviously a limiting factor, right? And there's not some as
Yeah.
there is
And
as many
depending on
relationships
what
as you,
what else is, yeah.
right? But in
Yep.
doing so, by
Absolutely. And depending on what's going on in your life, if you're a very busy professional, you may not have a lot of time to squeeze in like 6 or 7 relationships. Maybe just two are enough for you. And then, it also just depends on who you are and how you choose to live. One of the more, at least recently appealing poly styles to me is solo polyamory, sometimes akin to what's also referred to as relationship anarchy, where you are your partner. Your goal is not some relationship escalator where you're trying to find someone that you'll partner with and share a home with and do all your traveling with and marry and whatever else and share finances with. But those things are things you do on your own. And whoever you are dating and mating and engaging, you let them know thoroughly that there are other folks that are equally important or potentially important, and that you are enjoying each person just as they are with you, and that you don't have a goal beyond that enjoyment. And I think for a lot of folks who are independent, both financially and emotionally and socially, solo polyamory may make a lot of sense to them.
Absolutely. And I think that, in today's, quote unquote hookup culture, right? I feel like people are kind of doing this without giving it a title, right? But oftentimes it's more about the physical and not about the love. And, what polyamory is all about is finding connections, loving connections with people, and expanding and growing those loving connections with people. Whereas, like you said, swingers are more about just the physical exploration. So, I think it's all interesting to talk about and to let people know that there are options out there. It's not just one option, there are many. And I think it's so interesting that when you went to Africa, the people there, the women there were had to have a completely different mindset because their culture is just so different than ours. And they had no problem with, Clinton having an extramarital, affair, and thinking that, he should be able to do that, and have a son with somebody else, which I think is hilarious because it's more
No,
about
they didn't think of it as an affair. They thought of
right.
it as the beginning of a marriage, and that men should be able to marry more than one woman. And a man who finds a younger woman should be able to have children with that woman and increase his legacy.
And I think that that's so fascinating because culturally we are so different all around the world. And really respecting all of those cultures is so important. And when you meet somebody and they're of a different
Mhm.
culture, really trying to understand where they're coming from. Because if you're always looking at it from the lens of being, an American and, our culture and not thinking outside of that, you're going to miss a lot in translation. So I think it's really super interesting that you had those experiences. I want to talk about your book specifically and how you came up with the title. Hold on, I'm gotta look for the I lost it here. Here we go. 170
177 lovers and counting.
and counting. My life as a sex
Yeah.
researcher. So, I think that that title is I love it because it's like so bold. And on another one of my podcasts with Demi Wild this season, we talked about body count and how some people are really still focused on body count and, women's amount of partners that they've had. And sometimes you'll enter into a new relationship and your partner will say, how many people have you had sex with or slept with? And it's like, who cares? You know what I mean? But some people are still focused on that and think that being quote unquote promiscuous or having multiple partners is somehow a negative thing. And really each partner brings you to better understanding of yourself. So I find that that is just ridiculous. So I would love for
Well,
you
that's
to
a
talk about.
beautiful perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. So tell me about the
Yeah.
title of your book.
Oh, sure. Oh, the title. So originally, I just was trying to do sex history. And what's caused me to want to do one was I had given my students this assignment in their gender, sex, and culture class. And it was an optional assignment. And I was trying to explain to them that sex is really, and sex and sexual learning and sex histories include much more than penile vaginal intercourse. But nonetheless, my students, if they had had
Ding,
it,
ding, ding,
um,
ding, ding, ding.
did
Sorry. You're getting me excited
yeah,
over here. I
exactly.
had to do my little
Thank
dinger.
you.
Yes, it's not
I
just
love
about
your dinger.
intercourse.
Okay, so my students, because of what they believed, would just write about that, and if they'd had it, and then otherwise they were kind of at. And it was often like one single encounter that they were reporting for their sex history. Um, and
Okay.
then, and I kept thinking, I really owe it to myself to do this assignment too. So I
Okay.
started writing mine and realized that I had been spending my life as a sex researcher. And whatever I did was to learn more. And it wasn't necessarily to find the perfect partner. Of course, I found some wonderful partners along the way and um, lived with them and raised family with them and raised animals with them and all kinds of great and did great travels with them. So it's not like I haven't partnered, but I was even a coffee date was interesting to me because of what I might find out. And I've done so many coffee dates from people I barely vetted before I met them on the coffee date because I wanted to meet everybody I could and ask them all the questions I could. So I face that I'm a unique person in the world of dating is I'm more than willing to date for data. And one of the things that was just so interesting to me is I was on a dating site and, actually, what was it? I heard about this woman who did a TED talk, which had assessed that if you showed a little more skin in your dating photos, you would meet more people. And I thought, great, here's my bikini shot. I'll post that and see who else I can meet. And she, meanwhile, had done that in concert with doing a really thorough analysis of the folks she met and ran a bunch of algorithms to assess who would really be a match with her. She ended up doing all her assessment from the privacy and security of her home screen and then met one person who was the perfect match and they matched and she ended up marrying him and having a family and living a comfortable life together. And I thought, wow, I would have never wanted to do that. I enjoyed doing all my research, however I did it. I enjoyed going to
And
swing
dating is
parties and
fun.
living in
Dating is
Africa
fun.
and it wasn't always fun, but it was always an adventure.
True.
So, in any case, I'd had, many, many adventures, and I was trying to write about them. And then around, I guess it was about 2018, I had decided I had taught enough college. It was getting to the point where the cell phones were winning, and my students had very short attention spans. And it just wasn't working for me anymore. And I thought, okay, I need to, I will retire from teaching and reinvent myself doing other things, which I certainly did in the form of writing and a counseling practice and some other businesses as well. And I decided that where am I heading? Oh, the title. And so I decided to join a daytime writing group. And the folks in the group tended to be a bit older than I was because I, was, retiring right at 65. And they were had been retired for a while and had daytime availability for a writing group. And so I was bringing in these different stories that I was generating towards finishing my book. And they were rolling their eyes. And, at one level, they were excited about what I was up to. And another level, they were just had never heard anything like this before. And I could see that they just really wanted a number. So the next time I went to the group, I created an essay called 177 Lovers and Counting: My Life as a Sex Researcher. And the leader thought the essay was quite provocative and that I was just trying to do this just to get attention, and that I really didn't want writing help, and that I wasn't being and that I was just looking to, raise eyebrows and be disruptive. And so she asked me to leave the group. But
Wow.
meanwhile, the essay title stuck, and I liked that title, and I can't say the title was exactly accurate. I mean, that was a title I came up with 6 years ago. Obviously, it would be higher than that today because remain adventurous and curious and exploratory. And so that's the origin of the title. The publisher loved it, never challenged it, never said, "Oh, let's reduce it to 175," or anything like that, or let's not throw out numbers. But there you have it. That's my title,
Well,
and I'm going to stick with it.
I like that it's an estimate and not an exact amount because like I said earlier, the number of partners that you have is so irrelevant. Stop asking people how many partners they've had. It's completely irrelevant. And I have so much more to talk to you about, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. So we might have to do a part two. But that is quite all right because I love talking to you and I would love to maybe have you on season 4. So my last question to you is what tools do you bring into the bedroom to make things more spicy? And it doesn't have to be a physical tool, it can be whatever.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, my tool is attention. I like to pay attention. Some people are more verbal than others. And, some folks will tell you right away, do this, do that, don't do this, stop that, do more of this, etc. I just like to kind of be in my participant observer mode, which we anthropologists are really good at, of,
Yes.
engaging but watching. And, you know, and matching if matching makes sense. And also, putting a lot of attention on eye gazing, on breath, on being present. And, I'm not necessarily a subscriber to um, major acrobatics and all kinds of toys as much as being absolutely present and sharing breath and sharing life with another vital person.
I love that attention is the tool you bring. And that is so important to, really build that connection with your partner. And, I personally, a lot of times when you say that, I'm thinking to myself, half the time my eyes are closed. I'm not paying attention to, facial expressions or anything because I'm trying to pay attention to myself. So it is
Mm.
a very good tip, because I feel like I'm always having to bring myself back into my body to really focus on where I'm at and what I'm feeling, and stay present. And so my attention, is more on myself. And even though I'm participating with my partner, my eyes remain closed. So paying
Is
attention
it
is
because you're
very.
trying to track your orgasm and make sure you orgasm?
Uh Sometimes it's that. Yeah, I mean, all of it is beautiful from beginning to end, and I'm not
Mhm,
only
mhm,
focusing on the orgasm, but when
mhm.
I close my eyes, it decreases the visual so that I can focus more on the physical sensation. And
Sure.
so for
Mhm.
me, that is important, but I like that, paying attention to your partner, their facial expressions, and whether they're enjoying themselves, because everyone should be enjoying themselves. If you're not enjoying yourself, you're not
Mhm,
doing it right. um,
mhm.
so I love that tool. So everyone out there,
And also
uh,
paying attention, involves touch. Like when you're
yes.
touching someone, you want ultimately their skin is touching you back. So you're
Hmm.
sensing how their skin is receiving your touch. And you're sensing how their touch is feeling to you and if it's being delivered in a way that feels right to you.
Hmm. And I always say communication is so important in the bedroom. And if something doesn't feel right to you at any point in any of the events, it's okay always to
Mhm.
stop and take a break, or to say that doesn't feel good,
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
and giving everybody out there, my listeners, permission to do that, because we all are in it for enjoyment. And if you're not enjoying yourself, then
Sure.
you're kind of missing the point. So
Yeah, it's the ultimate opportunity to do really high fidelity communication. And, sometimes we're not able to. We're just spectators. We're watching a TV show or a podcast and we can't really give our input. But in the bedroom, that's your moment to be absolutely present and absolutely honest and not and bring up whatever you're feeling.
absolutely, communication is absolutely everything in and out of the bedroom, but especially in the bedroom, so that we can all get our needs met. We all want to have enjoyment. So again, Leanna, thank you so much for being on the
Mhm.
show today. I want to make sure that my listeners can find you. So please let us know where we can find you.
I there you go. There's my website, wisewomanssexandrelationshipconsulting.com. And on the front of the website, you'll see a link to my book, which you can order from my publisher. And I also offer people who find me and my book through the website a 25% discount on the book. So go for that too. And the book is called 177 Lovers and Counting: My Life as a Sex Researcher. Now, in June, I'm going to be at the Hollywood Fringe Festival doing 3 performances at the Broadwater Theater on my solo show, which is about, I'd say, a tenth of the book, but it's a really exciting, playful, delightful tenth. And if you happen to be in Hollywood or Los Angeles or Southern California, I hope you avail yourself of my show.
That's right. And I wanted to mention that here too, because, and we will make sure that this podcast comes out in June to coincide with your show. But Leanna is an actor, and she has a one woman show. And that is so exciting to me. I think that's so cool. I wish I could come see it. I would love to see it. Um, so if you're in California, definitely check that out as well. As a licensed physical therapist, I treat conditions of the pelvic floor and sexual health conditions, as I mentioned before. And you can find me and reach me on pleaseme.online. I also can be reached on the OWL app, and my code is EH576472 for those listening and not viewing. The code is up on the screen here if you are viewing. And there you can give me a call and we can chat about whatever questions you have, or we can talk about doing a consultation and possibly coming to see me for either health coaching or treatments for any sexual health condition that you may have. And I am located in Palm Beach, Florida. I also want to mention, and we did talk about some dating sites, right? And this one in particular, SDC.com, is a dating site that also is a wealth of information about all sorts of different things. This morning, I did a webinar for SDC.com, and I was live talking about having wetter and wilder sex. And so there are lots and lots of different webinars that they offer, lots of educational things, articles, podcasts. All my podcasts are there as well. So, reach out to me on SDC.com. This promo code will give you a trial membership. And just lastly, I want to invite you to support Please Me, the podcast. You can go to pleaseme.online and support the show. And I appreciate all of that support. And because of all of that support, Please Me is now in the top 10% globally. And so please go on to pleaseme.online, support the show, and leave reviews, because reviews are what really helps the podcast to grow. So Apple Podcasts, leave me a review, or Spotify. And on that note, I would like to just say goodbye to Leanna and thank you again for being on the show today.
You're so welcome. A pleasure.
Until next time.